definitely fire safety signage. And I understand I see what you mean on that.
Most fire safety signage is blue, so or green. Sorry, that's what you're looking at. The escape signs, and your fire door signs perhaps are about warnings about keeping doors closed. So I think we need to be careful about where we're going down there, because
I think
we're capturing everything.
I think you're absolutely right. And slips, trips, and falls would be a health and safety issue, not a fire issue.
In my opinion, it's like, if you haven't addressed that, obviously in the event of an emergency, people will slip over. But you should have already addressed that in your generic, your first attempt at your health and safety assessment for the building.
Could I just ask Andy? Andy, are you available? Andy Cunningham.
Absolutely, George.
Yeah. So, what would your take on this be?
I just think it's just such a vast arena, and we could get dragged into it all day long. There's so many pictorial references to hazards. There's, it's almost like we need to get a generic understanding of where we're at and what we're trying to achieve. From your slips, trips, and falls elements, just that alone. Would you identify that on the escape route? Yes, you would. If there was a hazard to health or a potential of a slip, trip, and fall. But we've also got to be mindful not to oversign. Oversigning then renders a sign blindness. We're gonna look at signage as being quite discreet, but equally satisfying the requirements of the code as a direction. We could go down that rabbit hole, as Paul said, because there are thousands and thousands of signs, and if you identify everything within that building, you're not going to have any recognition of anyone taking any notice of them signs. So you've got to look at the hazard, as Jim mentioned, especially on the chemical element. You can hazard if there's, especially on construction sites, very, very important to identify a hazard under a cost regulation. Most important. So you've got to determine the risk within the environment. I always say to my guys, you've got to understand and feel the building, and I also think that's very, very important myself.
So we're focusing on fire safety, so we need to be very tight on our definition of fire safety.
Absolutely, and but equally, you've got lots and lots of signs that encroach onto fire safety, especially chemical.
Sure. So we have to be careful we don't get diverted by those, don't we?
Absolutely, without a doubt. And that's why you've got to understand what we're trying to achieve. Are we trying to achieve escape route signing or fire safety or evacuation? I had a discussion with Jim last night about evacuation. We haven't mentioned that. The elements of potential terrorist attacks. You've got loads and loads and loads of things to consider. But Jim was right in what he said about looking at the understanding of what we are trying to achieve. We must look at that as a first, whether that comes out of a risk assessment. And unfortunately, we haven't got great risk assessors. I'll say that. Hopefully, there's no risk assessors on here, but maybe there are. And then it's not aimed at you, but we've got to understand it. I think we've got to take our own knowledge, our own guidance, and determine what we need to do within that built environment, and we can only do that in one building at a time. We can't sign we can't put a generic signage strategy across the board. And I know we're trying to achieve a lot of that here today, but there's so many variable factors within a building when we're trying to sign it out.
Absolutely right, John Field.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. So one consideration, the directional arrows, if it's pointing down as you step through a door, that denotes that you'll need to make your way down beyond that point. If it points up, then you go straight ahead. So that will perhaps prevent slips, trips and falls. And also, are we looking at fire equipment as well? Are we looking at not just escape signage, but are we looking at fire equipment? Obviously, the red signs as well. Is that what we're considering?
Can I just butt in a little bit there on two things before I forget them? One is that we've still got to deal now with the new legislation that deals with us making sure the information for fire and rescue need to be able to identify the sorts of hazards that I was talking about within fire safety as a generic group. The other thing about the thing about arrows above doors, they should always be pointing up, meaning you go straight through here. That's the proper international convention for moving forward. There's never a direct trip, slip or fall problem if you go down because you don't go from the door down immediately. There is always a landing or a step, and if that needs to be identified as a trip, slip or fall problem, then the step needs to be identified suitably when you go through the door. So the arrow convention for straight on is pointing up, and always has been for everything. Public information, road traffic, everything is pointing up for forward and straight on from here. So
Okay.
Well, what we're going to do, we're going to leave slip, trips and falls in there on the basis of, for the moment, certainly on the basis of what Jim says about it being relevant to firemen or firefighters. So anybody else got anything to put in there? Right, let's go down to question 1B. Right, have a quick flick through that one. To what risks are fire safety signs themselves susceptible?
So what do people do to them to stop them from working? Or, yeah, I mean, I think the smoke logging, as Andy has explained to me, is one of the critical areas. And
Yeah, smoke logging, George, is obviously very, very evident of what happened in Grenfell. And some conversations I've had previously is, if you've got a singular stair core and it smoke logs, you're proverbially you're in trouble. But then that's why you must define your own risk within the building, and if there is ever a potential to that to happen, and this is where we are, and I always say about plan B, then you define that risk, and perhaps you would encourage a safety way guiding system within. If you think that, if you've got plenty of borrowed lighting in the stair core, and the signage is signed out adequately. There's lots of conversations that we have in the industry about signage heights, and I know the code states from 1.7 up to 2 meters, but I'd never put a sign at 2 meters, never ever, unless it's at the head of a door and as near to the head of the door as practicable. It would always be at 1.7.
Right. So sorry. Let's get back to the question. What risks are fire safety signs susceptible? What can be done to them that will stop them working properly?
lack of daylight.
Or lack of
daylight.
Lack of lighting. I wouldn't say lack of daylight. I would say lack of lighting, because in lots of buildings you haven't got any daylight.
Right.
No, fine. Lack of lighting. Good.
Lack of lighting. Okay.
Okay.
Anybody got anything else?
All major escape routes will have lit fire signage. Yeah, that's the law, and I think we just need to be careful not to be trying to fix things that by nature of, if they're properly installed, they should work. The risk really is if anyone is making amendments to the layout, not actually then updating the lit.
I think you're being very specific to escape route signs. There are loads of signs that do not have a separate luminaire. They get their visual recognition from external illumination, and there are a huge number of non-maintained escape route signs as well that need to be illuminated under normal conditions. So I think we shouldn't feel that all escape route signs are actually internally illuminated,
especially if they fail. Okay, should we go on to the next one?
Let's move. Right, let's move. If nobody else has got anything more, let's move down to question 2.
No, Richard, can I cut across you there? I mean, and that's a great point that Anna makes, the fact that from a design application, that all health and safety signs, fire safety signs should be adequately illuminated in a power failure. In my experience, none are. You know, some of the buildings that I visit are absolutely disgraceful in their application. You've got mixed match signage identifications on back illuminated signage, static signage, PVC white signage, and it is a car crash of installations out there.
Okay, so that's the risk, right?
So we've got lack of
agreed.
lighting in there, so that covers that, doesn't it?
Good. Let's move on.
Let's go on to question 2. Okay, what information is needed about fire safety signs to ensure they perform as required? Right, just scroll down. Let's see if we've got any categories. Can you? Right, no, that's all we've got. What information do we need? Right, George, do you want to do your information piece, but briefly, very briefly?
Yes.
Like very briefly.
Oh God. Sorry, it's. Carry on, Richard.
Right, I'll tell you what, George. I think do that at the end when you're going to be talking about the different datas and stuff.
Good.
Okay, right. This is the information needed for fire safety signs. Have a quick look at that. Anything contentious or missing?
Are they something that would have an asset number? I mean, a unique identifier.
Would they have a unique identifier?
In my opinion, yes. If a golden thread, if it's an arrangement, it should.
Right, good one. So put that in, Jess. Unique identifier.
Manufacturer would be debatable for me. There's so many signs that without the manufacturer's detail on it.
Right, sorry, unique identifier and sorry, manufacturers.
Well, you know, I agree that there should be a manufacturer logo on the on a sign to satisfy the requirements of its you know, its manufacturer. So I know number 3 is manufacturer. You've got on a list there, so you've covered it. But you know, I'm seeing so many signs without a manufacturer.
Right, okay, delete that one. Okay, so anybody got anything new they think should be added on?
Do they need? Do they need Braille? Is this something that should be on a fire safety sign but isn't there?
Braille.
Yeah.
No.
For those that
Braille. Sorry.
With all due respect, if you expect Braille on escape route signs at 1.7 meters and 2 meters, and you really do expect the.
But aren't we talking about fire equipment signs as well, or not?
Well, would we really expect the clinically blind to fight fires?
No, not necessarily, but they can identify what the sign is, perhaps.
I don't know if they could find the sign, to be fair.
Well, again, we did discuss this at international and domestic level at great length with the RNIB, and they profoundly said that their own PEEP would discount them having to do that only at the final last resort, that some with partial sighted may want to intervene.
Okay, cool. Peter Thorns.
Yeah, the thing that you seem to be missing is any information on testing.
Yeah, there's very little in terms of information on this. So I think.
Yeah, can I explain that actually? The last time we had when we did the roundtables before, one of the roundtables, so one of the piece of guidance was fire safety signs and fire and lighting. And it was determined that obviously they should be split up. So they were. So the information that we had from that meeting got split in 2. So this is actually not so much not just a review, it's also putting some meat on the bare skeleton of bones that we got from the last meeting.
Yeah, so let's crack on with that. That's good. just
Take
take
rail
rail
out.
out. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else got anything to add into there?
Well, could I just add in there durability characteristics then, because there are standards for the manufacture of safety signs that would be information that you would.
Yeah, right. Durability, just durability standards.
Durability characteristics.
Sorry, durability characteristics
and performance.
Peter Thorns, the point you were just making, could you do me a favour and put it in the chat?
Yep. Okay.
Also,
Fantastic.
Paul Bray's just made a good point. So could you also put that in the chat so we can copy it over, please, Paul? This is about information needed by the. Yeah, that's exactly where that should go, I think.
Right. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, let's move down to question 3.
Can I just ask why that's crept in as anything different from fire safety signs? Because
sorry, what?
Well, the last one, wayfinding signage. What's so different about that than the rest of the stuff? Because again, this is where I had a problem yesterday with being.
Right. Just a minute. That should not be just. That is a note for the chat. It shouldn't be on this document.
Well,
it's not finished, George.
But,
it's a piece.
I'll tell you the reason why I raised it is because you talked about wayfinding signage.
Oh no! I wants to be examined, but it's not ready in that terminology.
But the signage for firefighters is a little bit different than the signage for escape, because it's about designating or identifying which floor they're on, where the flats are, and there's
it's not any
description on the sign.
It's not any different. It's all the same. It's a risk assessment based requirement.
I promise you, it's not. And we can agree to disagree over this, but I've been involved in putting all this wayfinding signage in 6 of my high-rise blocks that I manage, and it's completely different.
I actually wrote the stuff on wayfinding for the Scottish building regulations.
This is okay. It's different. Scottish.
I do agree that it is a requirement because of how it was actually brought in.
Sorry, can I just interject? Right. What would be helpful, Paul, is that if you could identify any specific attributes, because what we're really trying to do here is understand what attributes need to be recorded against a sign that we can then audit. So would, for example, the height of the what testing is also required. If we can change that to when it was last tested. Jess.
Yeah, that's the right context then, isn't it?
Yeah.
When was it last tested?
Yeah.
One element of the wayfinding is it has to be contrasting colours, and it has to be a certain font. Or
right. Okay.
Type of font, not a specific font, but a type of font.
Great. Okay. Can we put that in?
There has to be contrasting colours.
Would you mind putting that into, just so we get it right, John? Could you put it into the chat?
If you could put it in the chat, please. Right, just on the one above. On the one above, after tested, put everything else in brackets. That's it.
Well, yeah, before we move off that, so do we need to know whether it's, is it battery powered? You know, I mean, there's a range of different things there that suggest to me that we need information about signage. So a lot of these are battery powered, are they? So do we need to know what type of battery it is? I would have thought.
If it's internally illuminated, you'll have to know that it is. So you'll have to know that it contains a battery. You will have to know the type of battery and the manufacturer's recommended replacement regime.
Brilliant. Okay.
I think that when when it was last tested is totally acceptable, because you're leading people to think that fire door keep shut signs need a battery, and I think it's.
Or does it contain a battery?
Well, when was it last tested? So I think that's the most important consideration.
No.
Everything needs testing. Everything needs testing for efficacy. It all requires maintenance.
Are all batteries the same?
No.
Sorry.
We're talking about escape route signs only here, George, and we're not. We're talking about fire signage. Yeah, but we don't have battery operated fire location signs.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Fair comment. Yeah. So there's no batteries involved in this. Is that what we're saying?
No, we've done it all in emergency lighting anyway.
Yeah, that's fair comment, Jim.
Right. Okay. Let's scroll down now to question 3. What tasks are required? Just say, Bex has just put another one for signage, for the information. What tasks are required to ensure fire safety signage is installed, commissioned, inspected, and maintained properly? Okay.
So the principle behind this isn't to use SFG 20 particularly. It was to give an example of a work instruction that could be followed.
Yeah. So let's scroll down. Let's see if we've got anything here, because I'm not sure that we have. No, we haven't.
So does anybody have anything to contribute on that?
Well, again, it's specifically to do with electrical signs, and the majority of this is to do a visual check.
Yeah.
But that BESA is specifically for back illuminated signs.
Is it? Fine. So we're saying there's no tasks required to.
Well, a visual inspection.
I just put something in the chat.
Have you?
Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's. Yeah, so there's no guidance in terms of, other than just saying you need to look at it visually. You're saying there's no check that needs to be done.
Well, that's right, George, because the standard actually requires that says that the sign is no good unless it can be seen. So it's very, very simple. So yes.
So as long as you can see the sign, and there's no other.
And understand it. Yes, that's perfect.
Okay. Simple's good. I'm a bit surprised that there's no
well,
other
wait a minute.
guidance.
Surely, surely at the most basic level, for someone to install it, they've got to know where it's got to go.
That's installation.
Yeah, well, this covers installation.
No, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
Right,
actually,
we've got. I mean, that's at the most basic level. I mean, it's got to be specified. Is that on here? It's got to be.
You're right, Richard. Yeah.
Basically, all that stuff that we do for everything needs to be done for this, because it hasn't been done.
Yeah. So maintenance is probably a red herring here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I put it in, so it's my fault.
If I can interject, guys, I believe there is the competence to do so. So you've got to look at the competence, the conformance and the compliance of the sign, making sure that it's fit for purpose, and understanding what I was saying before, understanding what you're trying to achieve. So your competence elements of the installation process, and then obviously after handover, then you can have a maintenance element. And even if it's wiping it over once a year with a damp cloth, there's an obviously to get rid of the dust. If it's in a dusty environment, that's pretty much it. And then I have lots and lots of conversations with building safety managers. There's an element, and I think we touched on it earlier, there's an element of antisocial behaviour, people taking them off the walls, and then there's a duty of care to replace them accordingly. And then I think as far as a static safety sign is concerned, there's once it's installed, once it conforms, once you give your client your golden thread of information in the areas that it has been installed, i.e. a drawing, going back to what Paul was saying on the approved document B elements of it, we do 2 different drawings. We do a BS5499 part 4.
Right, okay. I just can't type. Wait. Just can't type this quickly.
No, okay, that's fine.
No. This is great stuff. You're taking us right from specification
you're quite right
the way through to maintenance. Right, we'll have that in the high point document. I think we'll have to take it from there, won't we?
I think the thing is, Andy, we're going to cover competence on the next question.
Okay.
Yeah.
I believe competence should be in this section as well. You know, we're asking about.
No. The next one talks specifically about competence.
Brilliant.
Yeah. What this is what information do you need to ensure that it gets installed properly and commissioned properly, etc.
Then that's very simple, the code and standard, because it tells you where to install it and how to install it.
Okay, could we just mention what that is? Could you put that into the text, into the chat, so we can copy it in there?
Well, you're looking at BS5499 part 4 and part 10.
Do you want me to type it?
Yeah, you type it. Yeah, I'm eating my sausage roll.
Okay.
Right, okay. Right, scroll down, Jess. And we'll put that up out of the chat from the high points. So let me just give an audio note to Roxy. What Andy's just been saying, please give me in full.
Good.
Okay. What level of competency training needs to be in place? Right, Andy, this is what you were talking about. In terms of the installation.
Absolutely. So the competence elements of it, as training undertaken, have been undertaken. Have you cross-referenced your training against the code and standard?
Well, have a look at what we've got here. Scroll down, Jess. Have a look at what we've got here and see if there's anything anybody else as well would add to that.
Are there any third-party accreditations for signage? Probably not.
I wouldn't have said so ordinarily. J-Light offered back in the day. J-Light offered a good training model and modules for installation and product selection and product positioning.
That's not third party, is it?
No, not accordingly. It was led by a manufacturer, but equally very, very important in the process of knowing where your sign goes, why it goes there, and the application and the correct application of the correct sign.
I think we've got that.
I think the British Fire Consortium and the Independent Fire Equipment Association have run courses as third party.
But that's training, not accreditation.
Well, there is an examination, so I presume it's an accreditation. But I would imagine that it's very simple to start up if there's a demand. I know the FIA considered it, but there was lack of demand. So I think a document like this would enhance something. So I know that the other fire association, the alarm one that's similar to FIA, also was considering doing an accredited course. So it isn't bad to put these in as as something.
So leave them in there. So it's possible that they will be there. Bex, you've put something in about it's all in ADB. Does that reference an earlier point, or is this one?
No, it's that. So all of the training materials would be based on approved document B. So I guess as long as you're competent at reading approved document B, yeah, that's what I was saying.
Okay.
Cool.
That's interesting because is the guidance still being used in ADB? The guidance under the fire safety order, the 9 documents.
Yeah, they're all guidance, but they're all based on, you know, the standards set out in the approved documents. So I suppose if you follow the guidance, that is a level of competency, but it's proving that you followed those guidance and you know the guidance, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it doesn't show you how to do escape route signs.
In what context? I think it defines the best placement of them, but that's down to the fire strategy of a particular building, isn't it?
No, it doesn't show you at all how to take somebody from A to B in an escape route.
This is going beyond my level of knowledge. I thought it did because I've based on my stuff on that before. So, but no, that's fine.
I think there's some clear guidance around where you could consider putting signage, but the signage needs to be installed in a way that's not confusing, because sometimes when you've got 2 directions of travel, would you put 2 arrows in? So people got to make a choice. You've got to make a decision on that. Whenever I'm looking at displaying signage, I would always use an analogy, something like, imagine you're Doctor Who, you've just arrived in the middle of a building via your TARDIS and you need to find your way out just using signs. Now, if you use that sort of like approach, you should be able to find your way out of a building, but just by using the signage. If you can't find your way out of a building just by using signage, then you probably need more signs. But again, I go back to a point that was made earlier. You don't want to be plastering your building in signs, in all these signs, so that you get sign blindness. But it's about having a common sense approach, applying the outline guidance, which is in the ADB and other guides. What I will say about the other guides is that the guides by the DCLG, if you're talking about sleeping risk guides and all that, that's about existing buildings. Approved document B is about buildings under construction or renovation. So you've got to be careful about the way that you interpret or apply that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Paul, because you have the qualifications to make those judgments. The British Standard obviously takes an assumption that this is the way you should do it if you don't know anything. As far as the corridor is concerned, that it's all laid out in part 4 what you should do under that circumstances. But again, that right in the forward is so clear that you are king in this debate because you're the risk assessor. As long as what you put down is followed in perpetuity with the golden thread, that's perfectly acceptable because it relies on your competence. But British Standards does cover everything, height, positioning, and the directional meaning of arrows. So that's all I can defend. You're much better at doing these things than me because you're a risk assessor.
Thanks, Jim. But I'm not going to argue with the British Standard, but I also point out that I frequently see signs that are wrongly placed, such as you were talking about arrow directions and things like that. You'll look at a final exit sign and you'll see an arrow above it where it shouldn't be. It should just be like the door shape. So the signage is frequently not necessarily right. However, as long as it does the job, that's what I'm looking at from a risk assessment point of view. And I think an enforcing authority will never pick you up on signage that does the job if it doesn't comply to the letter to the British Standard. Anyway, we sort of digress, and I was going to put a comment in earlier. I never expected such a strong, I was going to use the word heated debate, but strong debate around signage. Who would have thought it compared to the other topics?
Great, isn't it, Paul? Great.
All right, let's.
I've had nothing else to do for 30 years, Paul. Sorry.
Okay, let's scroll down a bit to maintenance. So in terms of maintenance, training and competence required, obviously manufacturer specific. We've said that realistically speaking, the maintenance side of things is not at the forefront with fire signage. So anybody got anything to say about those?
I'll I'll potentially say that it's not really manufacturer specific, because if the sign is on the wall and it satisfies the requirement irrelevant of the manufacturer, I think the manufacturers would all say the same thing. Maybe a wipe over with a damp cloth once a year, or
right, yeah. Do
you see what I'm saying? So the commissioning inspection. So the commissioning element of it would be on the handover document that satisfies the requirements, as I was saying.
Yeah.
Producing that golden thread of the drawing element is very, very important, and you can reference that against your maintenance regime. So you could quite easily take the drawings, check that against what was as installed, and could check that against, is it still there a year later? And if it's not, then you should seek consultation with your installer to provide another light fitting. Another sign. But from my point of view, the only thing that really upsets any maintenance elements or installation element of a signage is antisocial behaviour, not really anything else.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, remember we're in the competency section here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm reading underneath the maintenance element, though, Jim.
No, you're right, Andy.
Yeah. I think the competency section would very much form part of the installation. Elements of training may be given to your client if they're going to look at maintaining their building. I mean, I'm dealing with some building safety managers who 10 minutes ago were just auditors, no disrespect to auditors within an organisation, and they're thrust into a high-rise building and supposed to know everything about it, from plumbing, mechanical, electrical, ventilation, all the smoke control elements. Some of these, I'm digressing a little bit, I'm just painting a picture. Some of these guys and girls are not qualified to understand that built environment, because he's not there, so I'm trying, hang on just one sec, I'm trying to go back to basics all the time to say, understand what you're trying to achieve in a building and manage and maintain it. And unfortunately, in lots of cases it is done, in lots of cases it isn't done. So, but
absolutely,
outside of your maintenance, outside of your maintenance comments there, I don't think there's really a lot to add.
Okay, well let's scroll down then, Jess. Right, how are changes from one product to another recorded? So this could be a bit more relevant, I think. Scroll down to what we've got as requirements and suggestions. Okay, so we're looking at replacements, aren't we?
Well, there's two elements to it, Richard. One is on a new build, when maybe an alternative contractor or is appointed from what was originally specified. And this may be too complex from a signage point of view. As Andy has explained to me, it requires doing properly, but it's a relatively simple thing, isn't it?
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So maybe we're overcomplicating it. Is it the case that I think you're right that it probably is going to be more. I mean, do people change out? Is this something that does get changed, value engineered and things like that, Andy?
I would value engineered, yes, definitely. I had a conversation with a client recently, and he said to me, your signage tends to be more expensive than others. And I said to him, that's because I'll only use a good quality photoluminescent sign because it adequately illuminates itself in a power failure. But if you go and buy that £2 piece, 50 piece of rubbish off the internet, you need an emergency lighting above everything. So there's a design application for that. What are you trying to achieve? and we can cover all of that. But I think we are overcomplicating the silage elements. They're very, very technical. I think that's where Jim comes in. because you've got to tie up the relevant graphical symbols against the relevant hazard, and all of that is really a minefield of information that there's some guys in the industry have been working 30 and 40 years on that, and we've got that. We're lucky to have that. But as far as the signage, the signing element within a building, you just got to understand what you're trying to achieve. The only reason I think it would change, and we're changing lots and lots of them, especially on fire action notices, is when it's reverting from a stay put to a simultaneous evacuation, or vice versa, or you've got fire marshals in the building. But outside of that, you would still record the correct positioning for an escape and evacuation element. So
okay, so that's an important point. If we need to ensure that it complies with the fire strategy for the building, and I suspect that's not in this section. So could you just add that in, Jis, to ensure compliance with the current fire strategy for that building?
You said something very interesting there as well, George, about new builds. Very rarely is in the design stage is this looked at as an arrangement that then follows should follow the golden thread, because I agree nothing should change. Nothing should change in the lifetime of the building around those strategies and around the types and the sizes and all of that regarding the signs are concerned. But very, very rarely is it dealt with early on for new builds. It's always an afterthought. And signing and signs follow the same problems as every other specialist contractor, whether space has been left, whether it's been considered. I'm thinking about dry risers, wet risers, and how they and even security override switches, where they're positioned so that they can easily be located, and the sign that differentiates the call point from an alarm call point can be seen. So yeah, there's a lot of considerations to be done in the design side in new builds.
Okay, anybody got anything else they want to add in terms of change management? I think possibly we've covered that, haven't we? Okay, well then, thank you. I think we've covered that document. George, do you want to go into your information data piece?
Yeah, well, I've just looked at the spreadsheet, the RACI spreadsheet that we started to create, and because there were there's not very many information points that we're saying we need. I think potentially that's a bit overkill. So I think the principal thing that we're saying is that what we're trying to do is look at any other information that we need to relate to this in three ways. One is to look at things from a point of view of additional data that's needed. Let me show you what I mean. This is what we're trying to do with all of the other asset types. And that is to look at the information from a point of view of who's responsible for producing it, who's accountable for it, who needs to be consulted, and who needs to be kept informed. Now, in the case of fire signage, that probably is relatively simple for us to do, and may well align with the other things that we're doing. So if you're interested in continuing the conversation as far as signage is concerned, well, in general, then we're very happy to organise a session on this, on either data or process or application. So have we really covered it today? Is there anything else we need to be adding in, or do we think the guidance that we've sort of set out here is actually enough? Peter.
There's a definite need, by the way, because I already have architects asking me if BSEN ISO 7010 CD-ROM, which is the registered safety signs, can interface with CAD. Well, yes, the answer is yes, it can, but these are not actually safety signs. They're only the graphical symbols. And there, as we've already discussed, there's the signboard can include a directional arrow and can include supplementary text. So there's a great need for the data to be in BIM so that they can be transferred onto plans. Now, my advice up until now is to get in touch with your manufacturer of choice, especially in the design stage. Get in touch with your manufacturer of choice and get them to make up a specific spreadsheet that's machine readable specifically for you, in line with the type of strategy that you do. But as I say, for this purposes, it needs to be done.
Yeah, so that's a really good point that's been missing, and that is the symbols. So what you're saying is that there are some symbols that we should be including in the information section. You're on mute, Jim. Jim, you're on mute.
Oh, if you just put the symbols on the drawing, then that's what you're going to get in the building, which is not sufficient. You need the signs, the signboard itself, and you need a database for those signboards. In RICS, for instance, it's totally incorrect. On the product selector,
is there a standard set of symbols?
Yes.
Mm.
Yes.
Where
EN ISO 7010.
Okay. Can anybody share those standard symbols with me, and we can try and create them
on the ISO site and browse? You can't download them. You can browse them for meaning and everything else, but bearing in mind, nobody will necessarily want to share digitalized product with you.
No, I'm not talking about digitalized product. I'm just talking about a symbol.
Yeah, well, again, they get printed on a color printer and then posted up on the wall.
Yeah, that's the physical building. I'm talking about the digital building now. I think that's what you were referring to. So what I think we need is the symbol for that particular sign actually in the BIM model or on the floor plan.
Yeah. If you go to, I've put a link on there. If you go to the HSC guidance, and it's the safety signs and signals, the health and safety signs and signals brackets regulations 1996.
Yeah.
That leaflet gives you examples of all the signs that are, or not, probably not all of them. Jim will no doubt know signs that aren't there, but there's a whole list of signs. It talks about the different types of what a prohibition sign is, what a warning sign is, what a mandatory sign is, what emergency escape sign is, and then at the end of that or further down, there's the types of the green signs for escape routes. Then there's so I would put a link into that.
Paul, there's 5 different escape route signs in that L64, 5 different ones, none of which conform to any international standard.
Jim, could you give us something that gives us? So what was the standard you mentioned?
BSEN ISO 7010 is the international register
7010
for safety signs.
Okay, and do you know if anybody's actually produced those as CAD blocks?
No.
Okay. We can take a look at doing that.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay, so we're into the final 5-6 minutes. Is there anything that anybody wants to raise about anything affecting fire safety signs that we haven't covered?
I'd like to say, guys, as I stated before, that the minefield that is safety signs have already been designed. So that's really, you know, the basis of that, and gathering that information from a BIM model and having the ability to process that onto your BIM model is very important, as we well know. But the elements of the signing is relatively simple if you know it. So it's actually knowing it. And I think, you know, I would like to see a BIM model of someone who's designed a safety signage system, a fire safety signage system, escape route signage system onto a BIM model, and making sure that that information is gathered correctly. It's relatively a simple process to achieve, because the likes of Jim on BSI for the last 30 years has done all of our work for us. So it's just gathering that information, taking that information, whether it's on a 2D golden thread drawing like we produce or in a BIM model, it's quite a simple process to do. I've enjoyed the discussion immensely, but I'm just going to try and take it back to the fact that it is a relatively simple process if you're competent enough to carry it out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does, and it comes down to competency again, doesn't it? Anybody else? Anybody else got anything to add? Okay, well, I'm just going to reiterate then what George has said. If you're interested in getting involved in and digging a bit deeper into the information, not just about fire safety signs, by the way, just in information around the construction process. There are three areas, three sections that we've got quite a few people signed up to already. The first one is data, if you're actually interested in the data itself. The second one is process, how that data is used. And the third one is application. So if you want to get involved in any or all of those, put your name in the chat and we'll get back to you over the next few weeks with some dates.
And some people have already volunteered, so we've got you captured, Simon.
George, I just remembered that the company that I used to work for, J-Light, do an architect's package with all the fire safety signs in a spreadsheet that can be downloaded into CAD.
Great. Okay.
Excellent.
And that's J-A-L-I-T-E. Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, guys. Well, thank you very much. And hopefully we'll see some of you over the next few days for the rest of our meetings.
And Andy, I'll see you in about 10 minutes.
No problem, George. Anything.
Cheers.
All right, guys.
Take care, guys.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers all.
Take care.
Thank you. Really good discussion. Thanks.